My name is Emma, and it was an ordinary Tuesday morning when I first saw him. The kind of morning that felt as if the world was moving just a little slower. The way it always does when you're caught in a routine, unaware that life is about to change. I was at the coffee shop, the same one I went to every morning before work. The barista knew my order by heart, and I liked the comfort of it. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the chatter of the regulars, and the soft hum of the music in the background had become a part of my daily ritual. But that day, as I walked in, something felt different. As I stood in line, I couldn't help but notice him. He was sitting by the window, a book in his hands, his eyes intently scanning the pages. There was something about him, something magnetic that drew my attention even though I had no reason to stare. Maybe it was the way he seemed so absorbed in his book, or the calm presence he exuded that seemed to make the whole room slow down. For a moment, I wondered if I had seen him before. He didn't look like the typical regular I'd see at the shop. He seemed out of place, but in a good way. As I glanced back down at the counter to pay for my coffee, I felt a strange sense of familiarity, like I was meant to cross paths with him. I dismissed it as a passing thought and grabbed my drink. But as I turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter. And then, just as I was about to exit, our eyes met. It was brief, just a second, but in that moment I felt like I had known him forever. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only the connection between us. I quickly looked away, my heart beating faster than usual, unsure of what to make of it. I left the coffee shop, trying to push the encounter from my mind, but the feeling lingered like a whisper that refused to be ignored. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to focus on my work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the moment I shared with him. Who was he? Why did it feel like there was something more to that brief encounter? I couldn't understand it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it either. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the scene over and over in my mind. It was just a look, a simple exchange of glances, yet it felt so significant. I wished I had said something to him, even if it was just an awkward hello or a smile. But there was no going back, and part of me was afraid to act on it. After all, I didn't even know his name. The following morning, I found myself walking into the coffee shop again, almost as if I was being pulled there by some invisible force. I told myself I was just being ridiculous, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I might see him again. As I walked in, I glanced around, searching for any sign of him. And then there he was, sitting at the same table, his book in hand, just like yesterday. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I almost turned around and left. But then I caught myself. I had to know if that feeling was real, or if it had been nothing more than my imagination. I ordered my coffee and walked to the counter to pay, trying to act as if everything was normal. But my hands were shaking, and I was certain the barista noticed. I glanced over at him again, and this time he was looking back at me. His gaze was softer, more curious than before. He raised an eyebrow slightly, as if he recognized me from the day before. I forced myself to smile, hoping it didn't look as awkward as I felt. I walked to an empty seat in the corner, still stealing glances in his direction. The quiet hum of the coffee shop surrounded me, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. As I sat down with my coffee, I tried to focus on my phone, scrolling through emails and messages, but it felt impossible to concentrate. My eyes kept drifting back to him. He hadn't noticed me looking, or had he? There was something about his presence that made the air feel heavier, like there was some unspoken tension in the room. I could almost feel his eyes on me even though I wasn't looking directly at him. Just as I was about to take a sip of my coffee, I heard a voice, soft yet clear, asking, "Is this seat taken?" I froze, my hand hovering over the mug. I looked up, and there he was, standing next to my table, a gentle smile on his face. My heart skipped a beat. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He had crossed into my space, and for some reason, the universe seemed to have aligned for this moment. "No, it's not," I replied, trying to sound casual, even though my mind was racing. "You can sit." He slid into the chair across from me, his presence calm but electric. There was an easy confidence about him, like he belonged here. Like this was exactly where he was supposed to be. I tried not to stare, but his eyes were so captivating, the way they glistened with curiosity. "My name's Jack," he said, breaking the silence with a quiet chuckle. "I know we didn't exactly exchange names yesterday, but I thought I should at least introduce myself." I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around the fact that he was talking to me. "I'm Emma," I said, trying to suppress a nervous smile. "Emma," he repeated, his voice smooth. "I'm glad I ran into you again." I felt my cheeks warm. "It's strange," I admitted. "I couldn't stop thinking about you after yesterday." He tilted his head slightly, his gaze thoughtful. "I felt the same way," he said, almost too casually, like he wasn't surprised at all. "There was something about you. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to see you again." My heart skipped again. It was like he had just voiced the very thoughts that had been racing through my mind the night before. We sat there in silence for a moment, the quiet between us no longer awkward, but comfortable. It was as if time had slowed down and the rest of the world had faded away. All that mattered in that moment was the connection we shared, something that neither of us could explain but both felt undeniably. "Do you come here often?" Jack asked after a while, breaking the silence, and I chuckled at the typical coffee shop question. "I do," I said, feeling oddly at ease now that we were talking. "It's part of my routine. I work nearby." "Same here," he replied. "I've been coming for months, but I guess we just never crossed paths before." I smiled, feeling like the universe had been waiting for us to meet. "Well, I'm glad we did." And just like that, the awkwardness faded and I realized something. This wasn't just a coincidence. There was something deeper between us, something that felt like fate. We spent the next hour talking like we had known each other for years. It was the kind of conversation that felt natural, as if we were picking up where we had left off, even though we had only just met. He told me about his job as a graphic designer, how he loved the creative process and how his work often left him feeling both fulfilled and exhausted. I shared stories from my life about my work in publishing, my love for reading, and how I sometimes felt disconnected from the world around me, like I was stuck in a routine. As the minutes passed, I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. There was no judgment in his eyes, just an understanding that made me feel safe. When the conversation lulled for a moment, Jack glanced out the window, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said quietly, "I've always believed that the people you meet aren't random. There's something about how certain people just seem to come into your life at the right time. Like there's some kind of cosmic plan, you know? I tilted my head, intrigued. You really believe that? I do, he said, his voice filled with certainty. Maybe I'm being a little idealistic, but I think there's something meaningful behind every encounter. Maybe we were meant to meet today. Maybe it's not just a coincidence. I looked down at my coffee cup, trying to process what he was saying. I had never thought of things that way, but in that moment, it felt like there was truth in his words. Maybe the universe had guided us here for a reason. Jack caught my gaze again, his expression softening. I know this might sound crazy, but do you ever feel like there's something bigger at play in your life? Like when you meet someone or experience something, you can't help but think it was meant to happen? I smiled softly. I've never really thought about it that way, but after meeting you, I think I'm starting to believe it. The air between us shifted, and for the first time I felt an undeniable connection. It wasn't just the chemistry or the way he made me laugh. It was something deeper, something that went beyond the surface. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was more than just chance. The barista came by, clearing away the empty cups from our table, and I realized how much time had passed. The coffee shop was starting to fill up with the usual morning rush, and the quiet, intimate atmosphere we had shared seemed to be fading as the world around us picked up its pace. I should get going, I said reluctantly, standing up and gathering my things. I'm already late for work. Jack smiled, standing as well. I don't want to keep you, but I'd love to see you again, maybe outside of the coffee shop. I felt a flutter in my chest. I'd like that, I said, my voice a little breathless. How about we exchange numbers? We both fumbled for our phones, and as we typed our numbers into each other's contacts, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement, like this was only the beginning of something special. After we exchanged numbers, Jack hesitated for a moment, then took a step closer. I know this might sound a little bold, but would you like to grab dinner sometime? Maybe tonight? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because everything felt so fast, so unexpected. But then I looked into his eyes again, and I knew this wasn't something I should overthink. I'd love to, I said, feeling my smile widen. Jack's eyes lit up, and he smiled back. Great, I'll text you the details. With that, we parted ways, and as I walked out of the coffee shop, my heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. The world outside felt different, brighter somehow. I couldn't explain it, but I knew one thing for sure. Something incredible had just begun. The rest of the day felt like it was moving in slow motion. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for Jack's message, unsure of what exactly I was expecting. Every time I picked it up, my heart skipped a beat, hoping to see his name. It wasn't just the excitement of a new connection, it was something more, something deeper. Finally, around mid-afternoon, I felt my phone vibrate. Jack had texted. Jack. Hey, Emma, I was thinking we could go to that little Italian place near the park. It's quiet and cozy, and I think you'll like it. How about 7? I smiled as I read his message, feeling a sense of warmth spread through me. It was simple, yet thoughtful. I quickly typed back, Emma. That sounds perfect. I'll see you at 7. As the workday dragged on, I couldn't shake the excitement bubbling up inside me. I found myself replaying everything from our conversation earlier. The way he spoke, the way he listened so intently. There was a rare kind of connection in the air, one that made me feel as though we had known each other far longer than just a couple of hours. When 7 o'clock finally arrived, I stood in front of my mirror, nervously adjusting my outfit for the third time. I wanted to look nice, but not too much. Casual, but put together. I settled on a simple dress with a denim jacket and sneakers, feeling comfortable, yet still a little dressed up. As I walked out the door and into the evening air, I noticed the world seemed to have shifted slightly. The city felt alive in a different way, the streetlights casting long shadows as I made my way to the restaurant. The familiar hum of the city almost seemed distant now, as if this evening was its own separate world. I arrived at the Italian restaurant a little early, giving me a chance to catch my breath. I stood by the entrance, anxiously scanning the crowd, wondering if I would recognize Jack the moment I saw him. And then, just as I began to second-guess myself, I saw him. Jack was standing just outside, his gaze immediately meeting mine. He was dressed in a crisp button-up shirt and jeans, looking effortlessly put together. His expression softened when he saw me, a smile spreading across his face. "Hey, you look amazing," he said as he walked toward me, his voice warm and genuine. I blushed, not expecting such a compliment, but the sincerity in his eyes made my heart flutter. "Thanks," I said, smiling shyly. "You look great, too." We greeted each other with a casual hug, the kind that felt natural, like we had known each other for far longer than we actually had. As we walked into the restaurant, the atmosphere was just as he had described, cozy, intimate, with a soft hum of conversation in the background. The meal was delicious, and the conversation flowed effortlessly between us. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our favorite books and movies, our hopes for the future, and everything in between. There was laughter, a lot of it, and it felt so easy, so right. As the evening wore on, I couldn't help but feel like I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. It was as if the universe had been quietly working behind the scenes, preparing us for this very encounter. I didn't want the night to end. When dessert arrived, Jack pushed the plate toward me with a grin. "You're going to love this. Trust me." I laughed, skeptical at first, but then took a bite of the tiramisu he had insisted we try. "Okay," I said, laughing again. "You were right. This is amazing." Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm glad you like it," he said, his voice lower now, more serious. "But honestly, I'm more glad you came tonight. I've had a great time." I felt a flutter in my chest, his words making my heart beat a little faster. "Me too," I replied, my voice quieter now. "I'm really glad we did this." There was a moment of silence between us, one that felt almost pregnant with possibility. And then, before I even realized it, Jack reached across the table and took my hand in his. The contact was gentle, but it sent an electric jolt through me. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like something profound was passing between us. "I don't know what it is, Emma," Jack said softly, his thumb lightly brushing over my hand. "But I feel like there's something here, something real." I met his gaze, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't have words to describe it, but in that moment, I knew exactly what he meant. It was that same feeling I had when I first saw him, this sense that we were connected in some way, in a way that didn't quite make sense but was undeniable. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I feel it too." We both smiled, and for the rest of the evening, it felt like time stood still. Whatever was unfolding between us didn't need to be rushed. It was happening at its own pace, and for once, I was willing to let it. The night ended far too quickly. After dessert, we sat for a while longer, just talking and laughing, sharing stories about our lives and our dreams. The conversation flowed so effortlessly that it felt like we had been friends for years. even though we had only just met. It was easy to forget that we were still getting to know each other because everything felt so familiar. When the check came, Jack insisted on paying despite my protests. "It's my treat," he said with a smile. "Consider it my way of thanking you for such a wonderful evening." I could tell he wasn't going to take no for an answer, so I let him. "All right," I said, smiling, "but next time, I'm treating you." Jack grinned, his eyes sparkling. "It's a deal." We left the restaurant and walked out into the cool night air. The city was quieter now, the streets dimly lit by the streetlights, and the stars above seemed to twinkle just a little brighter. We walked side by side in comfortable silence for a few moments, neither of us in a hurry for the night to end. As we reached the street corner where we would part ways, Jack stopped and turned to face me. His expression was soft, and for a moment I thought he might say something, but then he just smiled. "I had a really great time tonight, Emma," he said, his voice quiet but full of sincerity. "I'm glad we met." My heart skipped a beat, and I found myself smiling back at him. "Me too, Jack. I can't remember the last time I had such a good time with someone." He stepped a little closer, and for a second I thought he was going to kiss me. But instead, he just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know what's going to happen between us, but I'd really like to see you again." "I'd like that too," I said, my voice steady despite the way my heart was racing. "I really would." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, the air between us thick with anticipation. Then, with a final smile, Jack leaned in and gave me a soft, gentle kiss on the cheek. "Good night, Emma," he whispered, his voice warm against my ear. "Good night, Jack," I replied, still feeling the warmth of his kiss on my skin as I watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the night. As I made my way home, I couldn't stop smiling. The whole evening felt like a dream. My mind raced with questions about what this meant, what was to come, but at the same time, I didn't feel the need to rush into any answers. Whatever was happening between us was unfolding at its own pace, and for the first time in a long while, I was perfectly content to let it. The next few days passed in a blur. Jack and I exchanged texts frequently, and every message felt like an exciting step forward. We shared more about our lives, our pasts, and our ambitions. I learned that he had moved to the city a few years ago for work, and though he loved it, he sometimes felt like something was missing. That something, I realized, might be what we were beginning to build together. We talked about everything: his favorite bands, the best books he'd read, the places he wanted to visit, the memories that had shaped him. And of course, I shared my own stories. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone in a long time. It was like I had found someone who understood me in a way I hadn't expected. One afternoon, Jack texted me and asked if I wanted to join him at a museum exhibit over the weekend. "I thought it might be fun. Plus, I know you like art," he said. I smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'd love to. It sounds perfect." That weekend, as we wandered through the museum, I realized just how comfortable I had become with him. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation, just a quiet understanding. We moved through the exhibits, sharing our thoughts on the art, laughing at the occasional silly piece, and enjoying each other's company. It felt like we had fallen into a rhythm, as though we had always been in sync. Afterward, we went for a walk in the park, the fall air crisp around us. As we strolled along, Jack took my hand in his, and I didn't hesitate to hold on. "I can't remember the last time I felt this right," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. I squeezed his hand gently, my heart swelling with affection. I feel the same way. We sat on a bench by the lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and it felt like the perfect ending to a perfect day. There, with Jack beside me, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something extraordinary. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to every moment I spent with Jack. Each day seemed to bring us closer, weaving us into each other's lives in a way that felt effortless, like we were always meant to be part of one another's story. Our conversations deepened, the laughter never stopped, and the connection we shared grew stronger. We explored the city together, tried new restaurants, and spent lazy afternoons in the park. It wasn't just the big moments that made it special, it was the small ones. The quiet moments when we simply sat together, our hands intertwined and let the world pass by. It was during these times that I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, Jack turned to me with a serious expression. "Emma," he began, his voice soft but filled with meaning, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart skipped a beat, and I turned to face him, sensing the shift in the air. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like I've known you for much longer than I actually have. From the moment we met, I felt this connection, like we were meant to meet, to be together." I felt a lump form in my throat. My heart was racing, and I didn't know what to say. He was voicing the very thoughts that had been swirling in my mind since we met. This strange, unexplainable feeling that we had always been destined to find each other. "I feel the same way," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I've never felt this right with anyone before. It's like everything has led me to you." Jack smiled, his eyes warm and sincere. "I know it's fast, and I know we've only known each other for a short time, but I can't ignore how I feel. I care about you, Emma, a lot, and I just wanted you to know that." My heart swelled with emotion. The vulnerability in his words touched me deeply, and I knew in that moment that I felt the same way. "I care about you too, Jack," I said, my voice steady now but filled with emotion. "More than I've ever cared about anyone." He reached out and gently cupped my face in his hands, his thumb lightly brushing across my cheek. His touch was tender, filled with so much affection. "Do you think we could see where this goes?" he asked, his voice a little nervous now, like he was opening his heart in a way that felt both terrifying and freeing. I smiled softly, feeling the same hesitation in my own chest, but I knew the answer. "Yes," I said firmly. "I think we could." The moment was filled with an undeniable clarity. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I wanted Jack to be a part of it. The uncertainties faded into the background, and all that mattered was the connection we shared. Jack's eyes softened as he leaned in, and in that quiet moment he kissed me. It was gentle at first, a simple brush of his lips against mine, but it was enough to send a spark through me. When we pulled away, I rested my forehead against his, both of us still catching our breath. "Whatever happens," Jack whispered, "I'm really glad we found each other." "Me too," I replied, my heart full of something I couldn't quite put into words. All I knew was that, in this moment, everything felt right. The weeks that followed were filled with more moments of joy, more moments of love. Jack and I continued to grow closer, each day adding another layer to our bond. We were no longer just two people who had met by chance. We were becoming a part of each other's lives in a way that felt meant to be. We began to talk about the future more. We made plans to travel together, visit places we both dreamed of seeing. We talked about our goals and the things we wanted to achieve, both individually and together. It was clear that we were building something real, something that had the potential to last a lifetime. One afternoon, we went to a bookstore that we both loved, browsing through the aisles, pointing out our favorite novels to each other. I came across a book of poetry that I had wanted for months, and as I reached for it, Jack appeared by my side. "Do you want it?" he asked, his voice low but filled with affection. I smiled and nodded. "I've been eyeing it for a while." Jack pulled it off the shelf and placed it in my hands. "I'll get it for you," he said. "I know you've wanted it." I couldn't help but smile. "You don't have to. I want to," he replied simply. "You deserve it." We walked to the counter together, and as the cashier rang up the book, Jack slipped his hand into mine. For the first time in my life, I truly felt like I had found someone who saw me, who understood me, who accepted me for all that I was. Jack wasn't just my soulmate. He was my best friend, my partner, and the person I wanted to share my future with. As we left the bookstore, I realized that I had never been more certain of anything. The love we shared wasn't a fleeting moment. It was something deep, something real. And I was ready to embrace whatever came next with Jack by my side. The months that followed felt like a beautiful blur, each day blending seamlessly into the next. Jack and I continued to explore life together, growing and learning more about one another with every passing moment. The world around us seemed to fall away when we were together, as though nothing mattered more than the simple joy of each other's company. We traveled to new places, discovering hidden gems in the city and taking spontaneous trips to nearby towns. We laughed at the smallest things, comforted each other in moments of vulnerability, and always supported one another through everything life threw our way. It felt as though we were building something unshakable, a foundation strong enough to withstand anything. But it wasn't just the grand moments that made everything so special. It was the everyday moments, the ones that seemed ordinary to others, but meant everything to us. The mornings when we made breakfast together, our hands brushing as we reached for the same ingredient. The evenings when we would curl up on the couch, wrapped in blankets, watching movies, sharing our favorite films and quotes. The quiet nights spent walking through the city, hands intertwined, talking about anything and everything. One evening, a few months after we had started dating, Jack surprised me with a picnic in the park. It was one of those perfect spring evenings, the sky a soft lavender as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in a warm, golden light. He had prepared my favorite sandwiches, brought a bottle of wine, and set up a cozy blanket under a large oak tree. The world around us was peaceful, and for a moment everything felt still, as if time had slowed just for us. We sat there eating, laughing, and enjoying the tranquility of the evening. As the sun finally set, Jack leaned back, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of amusement and something deeper, something more serious. "Emma," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I've been thinking a lot lately, about us and everything we've shared so far." I paused, setting my sandwich down and turning my full attention to him. His words always made my heart race, and tonight was no different. I've been thinking about that too, I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with emotion. About how everything feels so right, like we were always meant to be here, in this moment. Jack smiled, a little smile that made his eyes light up. He reached out, taking my hand in his, and for a moment, we just held each other's gaze, as if trying to convey everything we felt without words. "I feel the same way," he said, squeezing my hand gently. "But what I've really been thinking about is the future." My heart skipped a beat. "The future?" "Yeah," he nodded, looking at me with those same steady, searching eyes. "You and me. I want us to be in each other's lives for a long time, Emma. And I don't just mean the next few months or years. I mean forever. You've become such an important part of my life already, and I can't imagine it without you." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "Jack, are you asking me something?" He smiled, his voice dropping slightly as though he were about to ask the most important question of his life. "Emma, I don't need to rush things. I just want you to know that I want this, you, for as long as I can. You're everything I've been waiting for." My heart was racing in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel my own emotions welling up, the weight of his words sinking in. "I want that too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than anything." Jack smiled again, but this time it was a smile full of hope and something even deeper. Commitment. It was as if he had just given me a piece of his heart, a piece that I had already unknowingly claimed as my own. "I love you, Emma," he said softly, his eyes locking with mine. "I love you more than I can say, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." I felt my own heart swell with joy as I met his gaze. The weight of the moment settled over me, and without a second thought, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was a kiss that held everything we had been through, everything we had shared, and everything we hoped to build together. When we pulled apart, I smiled, my eyes shining. "I love you too, Jack, more than I've ever loved anyone." For a moment, we just sat there, savoring the feeling of being exactly where we were meant to be. In each other's arms, under the stars, with the promise of a future together. It felt like the universe had finally brought us to this moment, a moment that was more than just chance. It was fate. In the months that followed, Jack and I continued to grow, our relationship blossoming into something deeper than I ever could have imagined. We made plans for the future, talked about the possibility of moving in together, and shared our hopes and dreams for the life we were building. There were challenges, of course. There always are. But even in the tough times, we never wavered. We faced them together, supporting one another, holding each other up when one of us was feeling weak. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Because we were together. A year after that evening in the park, Jack and I stood hand in front of a small chapel surrounded by our closest friends and family. We had made it through so much together, and now we were about to take the next step. As the officiant spoke the words that would bind us together for a lifetime, I looked at Jack and I knew without a doubt that I had found my soulmate. The person I was meant to walk through life with, the one I would love forever. And as we exchanged our vows and the final words were spoken, I realized that everything had led to this moment. Our love was something rare and beautiful, something destined to last for all eternity. Because sometimes when you find your soulmate, it feels like the universe has been guiding you toward them all along. As we stepped out of the chapel, hand in hand, a gentle breeze carried the laughter and cheers of our loved ones around us. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything, as if nature itself was celebrating with us. Jack squeezed my hand, his smile radiating the same warmth I had fallen in love with all those months ago. The reception was a blur of laughter, music, and stolen glances between us. We danced beneath twinkling lights, surrounded by the people who had supported us through every high and low. I lost count of how many times Jack leaned in to whisper, "I love you," as if he needed to remind me, though he never had to. Later that night, when it was just the two of us, we sat together in the quiet, watching the stars. I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. The excitement of the day still lingered, but in that moment, it was just us. Two souls who had found their way to each other despite everything. "This is just the beginning," Jack murmured, his fingers lacing with mine. I smiled, knowing he was right. Life would bring challenges, joys, and unexpected twists, but no matter what, we would face them together. Because our love wasn't just about the big moments, it was in the quiet ones too. The stolen kisses before work, the way he always made me laugh when I needed it most, the simple act of holding hands as we walked through life side by side. As I looked at him, I knew with certainty this wasn't just a love story. It was our story, and it was only the beginning of forever.